Hey there, guys. I'm not sure if this is as much a video as it is really a public service announcement for replayers. The message is this. When you're doing a replay, you don't want to fiddle around necessarily too much with stuff. Now, if you go read a bunch of replay reports, you'll see where people do this. People will say, oh, I got so many games into my replay. Let's say I got 3 months into this single team replay and I noticed something was off. And then this is especially the case for card and dice games. They'll be like, and so then I played with this rating or I played with that rating. I tried to fix this thing up. I tried to fix that thing up to try to make this adjustment or that adjustment or whatever. Right? And that's where the warning comes in. Look, the stats are not going to be perfect a month into the season, 2 months into the season, 3 months into the season. Even if you're playing it every game by hand, the way that I've been doing these, you're going to see some weird things happen. That's just the reality of statistics, right? The reality of statistical reasoning with this is that there is going to be, as long as you have a game built on randomness, there's going to be some sort of deviation from the norm. And so as a result, if you're doing a project, if you're really interested in doing a project where you're going to, I don't know, replay a certain season, if you wanted to replay like, I don't know, like the 1908 season. I don't know why you'd want to do something crazy like that. You have to give it a little bit more time than just like a month or 2 or 3 or even 4 or whatever. You have to really give it some time, and you have to look at how the game plays throughout the course of the full replay. Now, there's a couple of reasons I'm saying this, right? I know I've done a couple of videos in the past on certain games in the baseball replay world that are somewhat controversial. I don't even think I need to name them by name at the moment. Right. The truth is, though, that it's hard for us to say whether a game is accurate or inaccurate based upon a very small sample size of games, right? You really need to get through and play it. The best way to test a game out is to play like a full replay with a game, and I mean go all the way through. Because if you go all the way through the replay, you can see how the game acts in different situations. What happens when this happens? What happens when that happens, right? Maybe you started off the season and, I don't know, Dom DiMaggio was hitting like 450 in 1949, and you thought, oh, this can't be right. You know, something's got to be wrong. Well, you don't then want to go into the game and take his hitter card or his profile or whatever and make some sweeping change to try to adjust for things, right? The reason why is because you might just have had a lucky roll, right? I know there's a bunch of simulations out there and stuff where they talk about people who think that they're on a lucky roll when really they got nothing but random numbers given to them, right? If you read about gambling addiction and stuff like this, you see people who sort of think this way, right? But it's not necessarily the addicts or the problem people who have this about them. It's human nature. We as humans are very prone to look for certain patterns and things that happen, and we're prone to look for things that to us don't make much sense or that indicate that something is wrong, whereas it could easily be explained just simply by randomness and just by the way that things turn out. When we're playing with a baseball simulator, every simulator worth its salt is going to have some major randomization component, right? If you're playing with, if you've been on the old Skeetersoft message boards, you know what I'm talking about. Old Uncle Honus, who I think passed away a couple of years ago, Poster would talk about his famous boards where you would just copy things straight over from Retrosheet, and there you go, there's your boards. Now you always know what's going to happen, and it then is realistic. But I mean, come on, that's not a game. Nobody wants to play anything like that. No, if we're talking about playing this the real way, you're going to have randomness, and in the world of random result generation, you're going to have some really kind of weird things happen from time to time. Maybe you're going to have, I don't know, the 1949 Dodgers end up like 7-8 games out of first place at the beginning of the season because they can't hit, right? Which sounds really weird, and you think, well, there must be something wrong with how they were created. I mean, maybe there is. Maybe there's a huge problem that, you know, is not known and that we're not seeing. Chances are, though, that their hitting will improve as the season goes on. They may have just had really bad luck in games that were really close, right? I mean, who knows, right? There's all sorts of things that could explain this, right? We can certainly think of real-life Major League Baseball teams. I'm thinking off the top of my head of the 2006 Yankees that had excellent offensive attacks and yet didn't go on to win it all and are not remembered as one of the best teams of all time. And the reason why, of course, is because of that random fluctuation that comes in from a game-to-game basis, right? You can build a team to maybe win in the regular season, as any Oakland Athletics fan will tell you, but when it comes to the playoffs, I mean, you got to have a little bit of flexibility because there's all sorts of weird things that can happen, right? So that's kind of what the point is here, right? When you're looking at even a full season replay, if you play all 1,200 whatever games for a 16 team full under 54 game schedule season, you're still going to see stuff that's going to be off and it's going to be a little bit odd. The big question then is, how do you know that there's a problem with the game versus it's just random luck? Well, you got to look at things in a larger picture. You got to look at the aggregate. You got to be looking at not necessarily the players batting average, but rather what's the league-wide batting average, what's the on-base percentage, what's the slugging percentage, right? You have to look at some sort of those individual building blocks that will tell you how the league was calibrated. How does runs scored look? How do runs allowed look? What's the difference between the team with the most runs scored and the team with the smallest amount of runs scored, right? Is it possible that you have some teams that have in terms of our favorite domination index that look totally dominant because they are way, way away from the other teams in terms of number of standard deviations from the mean of runs scored. And you also have other teams that look like they're really, really bad, like the Japanese team I was telling you about the other day, where you're just scoring no runs at all, and compared to the league environment, you're doing horribly, right? If you see that happen in a replay and then in real life it didn't really happen at all, and you start seeing a pattern like that, that's a little bit different, right? That might be an indication that there might be something going on with his game. Maybe something is too weak. There are other variables you have to account for as well. It depends on how you play your replay, but it is true that if you're playing with real life lineups and transactions and you're kind of ignoring, how players are playing, you're just starting them as they did in real life, you got to go back and look at maybe some of those players. Maybe some of those guys shouldn't have been starting every game, right? Maybe there was a better answer on the bench. Maybe there was something you did as a manager that, may not have been the best move in the world. Again, you know how I feel about this stuff. It's not that I'm against real life lineups and transactions. I just feel like it's a sort of a crutch that we tend to use maybe a little bit too much, right? We got too many people who are excited about this, and I would argue that most people get excited about it because it's the easy way out, right? You don't even have to think. The game just does it for yourself, right? So anyways, all sorts of different stuff to look at. If you're playing the way that I am, you got to think about, well, maybe I really did overuse this guy, right? Maybe I shouldn't have played him in so many games, or hey, maybe I shouldn't have taken out so-and-so even though he wasn't hitting. Wood Conroy is the example, right? Wood Conroy's not hitting very well. He's hitting like 100. Maybe I shouldn't have taken him out though, because in real life he hit like 230, right? He might have changed things up. Or if you don't like, batting average, which nobody should like anyway, well, you look at his WOBA or whatever it is you want to look at, refigure the statistics, it's still an offensive number, and you can still compare it to how it is in real life. And it'll get you an idea of sort of what is realistic and what is not. My pet peeve, though, is whenever I come across the replay in which we played maybe through half the season, looked at what was going on and said, oh my gosh, this isn't right, and then made some like structural or fundamental change to how we played the game to finish up the season, right? Because it's not really a valid replay. It's not really a valid project. I hate to say someone's project's not valid, but it's not. Right? Because you made this big change, and so your results are totally skewed by, the over adjustment that you made for what you thought was a weakness in your replay before. It might not even been a weakness, right? It might have been okay. It might have been one of those things where we say, well, just keep going and let's see what happens in the end. Anyway, there you go. Hopefully you can sort of figure out what it is I'm talking about. But that's one of those things that kind of gets to me. And I think it's important to, as my dog starts talking to us, I think it's important to keep that in mind when you play through any sort of project that, sometimes things won't wind up exactly the way that they did in real life. And it's okay. It doesn't have to. Anyway, talk with you guys again tomorrow. Take care. Bye.